All right, today we're going to dive into a really big idea in the biblical storyline, the New Covenant. And look, this isn't just some dusty old theological term. It's actually framed as the ultimate solution to a massive problem, a broken relationship between God and humanity. So what exactly went wrong? And how is this new promise supposed to fix everything?
So let's kick things off with the question at the very heart of this idea. What if a promise wasn't about you just trying harder to follow a bunch of rules? What if it was about a fundamental change happening inside of you? That's really the core concept we're going to unpack. It's not about getting a new rule book. It's about getting a new heart.
Okay, first things first. Let's get on the same page about what this word covenant even means. It's not really like a modern business contract. Think of it more like a relational agreement. It's the very framework, you could even say the operating system, for how the relationship between God and his people is supposed to work.
Yeah, but here's the thing. That framework, that operating system, it was fragile. The entire biblical story is really built around this central crisis. That relationship and the covenants that were supposed to define it just kept breaking down.
And this really gets to the core of the conflict. On one hand, you have God's law, like the Ten Commandments, given at Mount Sinai, a perfect roadmap for how to live. But on the other hand, you have what the source material calls the human heart problem, this deep, persistent inability to actually stay faithful to God. The law wasn't the issue. It just acted like a spotlight, revealing how deep the real problem was.
And the end result of this constant failure? Well, it was a total catastrophe, the exile. This wasn't just a political defeat. The prophets saw it as a spiritual verdict, a sign that the covenant relationship was completely broken.
Right, and we have to understand, this exile wasn't just about people getting kicked out of their homeland. It represented a complete and total relational rupture.
I mean, it symbolized a total breakdown. The covenant agreement was shattered. Sacred places, like the temple, were destroyed, which meant losing the tangible, visible sign of God's presence. And what all that adds up to is just this profound sense of distance. The connection was basically severed.
So the prophets, looking at this whole mess, they basically diagnosed the root cause. It wasn't that the law was bad or needed to be tweaked. The issue was a hardened heart, a heart that was fundamentally incapable of the kind of loyal love that the covenant required. Just telling people to try harder was never, ever going to work.
And this is where the whole story just takes a radical turn. Because if the problem was internal, the solution had to be internal too. The prophets didn't start demanding more effort. They announced that God himself was going to intervene in a way that came from the inside out.
Just listen to this promise from the prophet Ezekiel. He's talking about a divine heart transplant. God is going to remove that heart of stone, the one that's cold, hard, and unresponsive, and replace it with a heart of flesh, one that's alive, soft, and actually capable of a real relationship. It's a promise of total internal transformation.
And the prophet Jeremiah, he echoes this exact same idea. He says the law won't be written on external things like stone tablets anymore, but internally, on their hearts. And don't miss that second part, because it's absolutely crucial. Permanent, decisive forgiveness. The slate is wiped clean, for good.
So if you put all that together, you get these 4 core promises of the new covenant. It's like a complete package designed to solve that heart problem from every possible angle. You get a new heart, a new spirit, the law becomes an internal desire, and all your failures are permanently forgiven.
Okay, so you've got this incredible ancient promise. How does it actually play out? Well, the New Testament writers see it being fulfilled in this massive shift, a move away from an external system of law to an internal reality powered by God's own Spirit.
And the contrast between the two covenants is just so stark. The old one was external, written on stone. It was a letter that, while good, ultimately just exposed people's inability to keep it. But the new covenant? It's internal, written on human hearts. It's not about the letter of the law, but about the spirit, and the result isn't failure, but life. It's a total upgrade to the relationship's operating system. And you know, the implication of this is just massive. The very location of God's presence on earth moves. It's no longer primarily found in a sacred building, like a temple, but now it's within the community of people themselves. This directly solves that huge problem of distance and separation that the exile represented.
And the ultimate outcome of all this new internal presence is that access to God is completely and totally restored.
You see, under the old system, getting close to God's presence was heavily restricted. It was limited to certain people, at certain times, through all these rituals and sacrifices that had to be done over and over and over again.
The whole system constantly reminded you of the distance in the relationship.
But the New Testament, especially the book of Hebrews, argues that Jesus' work is what finally makes these new covenant promises a reality. It was a once-for-all act that provided a definitive cleansing and total forgiveness. And the result? The barrier is just gone. The way is open for permanent, unhindered access to God's presence. The separation is over.
So what's the bottom line? The new covenant is presented as the foundation for a restored relationship that's actually resilient. Its security isn't based on our shaky up and down performance, but on God's decisive action to change us from the inside and forgive us completely.
And all that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If the whole basis of this relationship is an internal change given by God, a new heart and a new spirit, instead of just following external rules, what does that actually mean for how it's lived out day to day? That's something to think about. Thanks so much for joining us.